the Council's YouTube channel. I'd like to recommend participants of a few housekeeping points. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. And I remind everybody who's not speaking to mute their microphones, please. Thank you. Please keep your camera turned on when you speak at the hearing, and please note that the chat function has been disabled. If parties wish to add any additional information other than at their allotted time to speak, they must use the raise the hand function so that they are not missed. I also ask that members keep their questions and comments brief and to the point. Before I move to item 1 on the agenda, we've had 2 matters come before us. The first one is a request to allow an extra person into the meeting. I do have the discretion to be able to do this. Could the lawyers for the applicant please explain this?
Yes, good evening. My name is Robert Botkai. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Robert.
I think the person you're referring to is John Mann. Is that correct?
I'm not absolutely sure. I understand you wanted to have a person admitted to this meeting rather than watching it on YouTube. A trainee, was it?
I know. Sorry, Gina Keller is an associate solicitor with my firm, and she's observing the meeting, but she's not likely to participate. So her camera is off. So I didn't know I needed your permission for that. But yes, please.
I'm sorry, you did request it, so I've looked at the request that she be allowed to join. Okay.
In which case, please can she join the meeting?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I will do. I take it there aren't any objections. Thank you. I'll move on. I now move to item 1 on the agenda, and again, before moving on to that item, we've had correspondence from the applicant's solicitor to submit an extra document. Can I ask Robert to just explain that for the benefit of everybody in the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, and apologies, it's a bit late. I was provided with some data right at the end of last week. I could only access it on my mobile phone, and it was a bit of a challenge for me to make head or tail of it, and I didn't want to submit something that I hadn't understood fully before doing so. So the first opportunity I was able to do to send it was actually yesterday. So I submitted it to Lorna and with the request that it be circulated if nobody objects to it. And I'll explain the data. It's not terribly complicated, but I think it will assist the committee during the hearing.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask the other involved parties and the objectors if they'd like to comment on this request?
I've seen the information. Sorry, Tony Boys here. No objection from me.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. Yeah, I'm happy to proceed on that basis, and thank you for advising us in advance, Robert.
Thank you.
So moving on to our item 1. Apologies have been received by Councillor Chevot-Verdier. Councillor Chevot-Verdier did inform us at the very, very earliest opportunity, and I understand there was it's a matter of administration and meetings as to why he can't be in 2 meetings at the same time. So we are proceeding with just the 2 councillors for this hearing. I'll move on to declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stanton. Item 3, Shell Fulham Cross 222 to 224 Fulham Palace Road, London, W69NT. I would like to ask everybody participating to introduce yourself as I call on you. We should have with us Milan Patel, Area Manager of Motor Fuel Limited, the applicant.
I'm here.
Thank you. Robert, is it Botkai?
Yes, that's right. Yes, good evening.
Thank you. You're the applicant solicitor. Lorna McKenna, the licensing officer.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Karen Legg, our licensing officer.
Present, Chair.
And Goethe Kahela, the council's legal officer.
Present, Chair.
I have the from the responsible authority, David Evans, who's police constable for licensing officer.
Sorry, that's Dan Evans, but yeah, present.
So, I beg your pardon, Dan. That's my misreading of that. Thank you. Objecting, local resident Tony Boys.
Yes, I'm here, present.
Thank
So
you.
I'm a local resident and chair of the local SNT ward panel as well.
Thank you. And is Councillor Nikos Souslos with us? No, then I'm going to carry on the procedure. Before we begin, I can confirm that in addition to the main agenda, so has somebody got the microphone on? Thanks. Before we begin, I confirm that in addition to the main agenda, supplementary agenda, which we've already dealt with, we will now hear from the following. Firstly, the licensing officer, who will introduce the application.
Yes, Chair. Also, I just think Chris Cardwell is also one of the PCs from the licensing team's also here. I don't know if he'll be speaking or if Dan will. So just to let you know, Chair.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks, Lorna. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am present, Chair, but I won't be speaking this evening. Thank you.
So I'll introduce the application. On the 7th of June 2023, Andrew Sanders of Winkworth Sherwood LLP submitted an application on behalf of Motor Fuel Limited, the applicant, for a variation to the premises licence to be granted in respect of the premises known as Shell Fulham Cross 222 to 224 Fulham Palace Road, London W6 9NT. The premises currently benefits from a premises licence, and the current premises licence permits the following licensable activities: the provision of late night refreshment off sales Monday to Sunday, 2300 hours to 5 AM, the sale of alcohol off the premises Monday to Sunday from midnight to midnight. The opening hours of the premises are midnight to midnight. The applicant has applied to vary the premises licence to remove condition 19 from the licence, which is detailed below. Condition 19 reads as: the sale of alcohol between the hours of 1 AM and 7 AM shall be by way of delivery only to a residential or business address. There shall be no sales of alcohol between these hours direct to customers at the premises. During the consultation period, the licensing section received 4 representations objecting to the licence application. Of the representations which we received, one was from the police licensing team, who are a responsible authority, one from Councillor Nikos Souslos, one on behalf of the Crabtree Residents Association, and one from a local residents. There have not been any warnings or cautions given in respect to this premises during the last 3 years. There has been one additional item submitted as supplementary agenda, which was circulated on the 31st of July 2023, which was a document from the applicant showing sales of alcohol over the recent period. This has been circulated to all relevant parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lorna. Can I now hear from the objector? Tony Boys, will you be able to fit what you want to say into 5 minutes?
Yes, I will try. I will absolutely try.
Thank you very much. Please continue.
Give me a countdown.
No, yeah.
I'll start straight away. Okay, so yes, I'm Tony Boys. I'm actually a local resident and the chair of the Safer Neighbourhood Team Ward panel for the Fulham Reach Ward, and I work with the police quite a lot. So I've written in objection to the application, and I've stated, as you will know, the Planning Committee are required to consider the planning policies and standards which have a bearing on the application, central government directives and guidance on the type of development proposed, any similar developments which may have already taken place in the area, and the possible impact of the proposal on the area. So further, the relevant legislation here is incorporated in the Hammersmith and Fulham Statement of Licensing Policy, which says that the licensing objectives which must be promoted are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And these are the same principles which guide the community involvement in licensing. So the policy also says that any licensing application must demonstrate when setting out the steps they propose to take to promote the licensing objectives, that they understand any risk posed to the local area by the applicant's proposed licensable activities. Also, that applicants in respect of off-licenses and other premises selling alcohol for consumption off the premises may need to consider whether there are appropriate numbers of staff on duty to deal with possible intimidation to sell alcohol. Further, it refers to the Secretary of State's guidance, which states that applicants are expected to obtain sufficient information to enable them to demonstrate the steps they propose to take to promote the licensing objectives, and that they understand the layout of the local area and physical environment, including A, crime and disorder hotspots, B, proximity to residential premises, C, proximity to areas where children may congregate, D, any risk posed to the local area by the applicant's proposed licensable activities, and E, participation in any local initiatives, for example, local crime reduction initiatives or voluntary schemes such as Asper Angela, local taxi marshalling schemes, street passers and other schemes, which may help to mitigate potential risks. Applicants are expected to include positive proposals in their application on how they will manage any potential risks. And it's worth pointing out here, I don't think that I have seen, and I don't know if anybody has seen information from the applicant in respect of that demonstration of those items. Also, the licensing authority will consider whether the licensed activities are likely to have an adverse impact, especially on local residents, and if there is potential to have an adverse impact, what, if any, appropriate measures will be put in place to prevent it. Also, whether there will be a substantial increase in the cumulative adverse impact from these or similar activities on adjacent residential area, whether there is a suitable level of public transport accessibility to and from the premises, whether the activity will be likely to lead to a harmful and unmanageable increase in car parking demand in residential streets, forming part of the strategic London road network or the London bus priority network, leading to a negative impact on the licensing objectives relating to prevention of crime, disorder, antisocial behaviour, nuisance and vehicle emissions, and E, whether there have been any representations made by relevant or responsible authorities. Last but not least, the policy sets out guidance for closing times, and it shows that for a residential area like this, the closing time for selling alcohol must be 2200 hours, 10 p.m. And this is the appropriate time to apply here. In fact, where current licensing extends beyond 10 p.m, then it really ought to be pegged back to 10 p.m. So in this application, as I said, I haven't seen information from the applicant that covers all of those areas, which gives me cause for concern. The police are also going to speak. They tell me in the ward panel that alcohol is one of the major contributors to violence and crime in the area. And there is a paper from the Faculty of Public Health. The paper is called Alcohol Violence, and that states that alcohol-related violence impacts on physical, mental, and sexual health. It places considerable strain on health services and other public sector resources, making it a major public health issue. Alcohol misuse is a prominent feature of many types of violence, including violence in public settings, sexual violence, and domestic violence. In England and Wales, alcohol is thought to play a part in approximately 1.2 million violent incidents, which is almost half of all violent crimes, with devastating health consequences. Staff are also victims. For example, 116,000 NHS staff are assaulted each year, primarily by patients and relatives.
Tony, could I just give you a gentle reminder about the time? Well, no, I'll let you get to the point, but if you could come to the point, please.
So my point is, as I said previously, there's a lot of legislation and indeed the Hammersmith and Fulham regulations on licensing, which require applications to consider a large number of these considerations in the application. And I have not seen that they have been considered. And so on that basis alone, I think the application must be rejected. It may be that they would be given leave to return once they have indeed set out and considered all of these factors, such as the impact on residential area, as for Angela, etc. But as far as I can see, I have not seen papers that show that those have been considered.
Thank you very much, John. Is that in conclusion? Thank you very much. If I can now come to, is Councillor Souslos with us?
Sorry, Chair. I think we skipped over Dan Evans, the responsible authority.
Thank you, David. Dan Evans, please.
Yeah, good evening, Chair, Council. As I said, my name is Dan Evans. I'm one of the police licensing officers covering Hammersmith and Fulham. As per my representation, the police, we strongly object to the application to vary the premises licence for Shell Garage. This venue sits on a through road, which is mainly a residential area with local shops and an open green space, namely Lily Rec. Also situated close by is Charing Cross Hospital. Shell already holds a very generous licence, allowing them to sell alcohol 24 hours a day, albeit between the hours of 1 and 7. That must be through deliveries only. But yeah, following the application, I've liaised with our local Safer Neighbourhoods officers who work in the area daily. They've expressed real concerns that if this licence were granted, there'd be increase in crime and disorder. As stated, opposite the Shell Garage is Lily Rec. This is a large open area with a children's play area. This is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with the park containing benches in the open area, but no toilets in the park itself or anywhere nearby the vicinity. It is of the Safer Neighbourhoods team's opinion that if Shell were to be granted this licence, it will create drunken antisocial behaviour in the local area, and this could also lead to an increase in assault and public order crimes. On a regular basis, there's beggars and street drinkers that frequent around the area, namely outside of the shops, Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, all located 2 minutes from the Shell Garage. This causes a nuisance to members of the public and alike to staff at Charing Cross Hospital, where it's been reported that people are taking their alcohol and sleeping in the grounds inside and in the hospital canteen when intoxicated. Even with diminishing numbers of police officers, the Safer Neighbourhoods team have worked hard to reduce crime in this area, which currently has a low crime figures. Following my representation, I was further contacted by one of the police officers, Chris Young. He works as part of the mental health liaison team and works closely with the hospital. Chris reached out to myself stating that hospital staff were worried as patients in hospital vans have been leaving the hospital at all hours of the day and night to buy alcohol and then returning to the hospital, thus putting themselves and hospital staff in danger due to their vulnerable states and the behaviour towards hospital staff. I am, and the police are of the opinion, by removing the condition and being able to sell alcohol 24 hours a day, every day to walk-in customers, the potential for crime and disorder to take place will significantly increase and therefore undermine the licensing objectives, specifically the prevention of crime and disorder and the prevention of public nuisance. The police have real concerns that by allowing this premises to have a 24-hour licence to sell alcohol, it will open the floodgates to other premises and future premises to do the same. Having a number of 24-hour off-licence in any area would significantly increase the potential for crime and disorders to take place. I think you're on mute, Council.
You can. Thank you. Can we now hear from Councillor Souslos if he's here, which he doesn't appear to be, in which case I'll go to the applicant if I may. And Milan, will you be speaking, or will your or will Robert be speaking on your behalf?
I'll be speaking, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Am I limited to 5 minutes? I've got a little bit to cover, or is there some slack?
Well, let's see how we go.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I'm here with Milan Patel, who's the area manager, and also John Marn, who's head of range and space for Motor Fuel Group. We own over 650 24-hour licensed petrol stations around England and Wales. You may be aware that there is particular significance to this store. It was previously owned by Shell. It's not anymore. But it was one of the very first petrol stations to be licensed to sell alcohol back in 1994. I just mentioned that in passing. We haven't put any additional conditions in an operating schedule, which we would normally do, because this license is already subject to really robust conditions. They are in your papers. And they include conditions, important conditions, such as that no high-strength beer or cider is to be sold. So nothing over, no beer or cider over 5.5%. So the conditions have clearly been very carefully considered in the past. And we don't just write conditions in an operating schedule for the sake of it. We considered each of these conditions, and really there was nothing further to add. The problem condition, and the reason we're here today, is that condition 19 restricts sale of alcohol to delivery only between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. So that's the only time period that we're considering today. We already trade 24 hours a day, but our shop doors are closed at 10 p.m. and open at 6 a.m. So can you hear me? Yeah. So we operate through the night pay window between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. The store was actually acquired by Motor Fuel Group. So the screen's just changed. Is the chairman left? No, it's still there. Okay. The beauty of online hearings. We acquired the store in May 2023, and I can, having checked with the manager of the store and head office, there have been no issues since we started operating the store. There have been no complaints raised by residents. There have been no contact from any of the officers as to any issues that have been brought to our attention. We don't have problems with street drinkers frequenting the premises, and we certainly don't have hospital patients coming to our premises in their gowns. And noted that we are already open and trading 24 hours a day. I note the police objection. I had a very good conversation with Dan Evans during the consultation period, and understand the concerns. And the main concern appeared to be that the site, we are very close to the Charing Cross Hospital. We've been down to have a look, and we're obviously familiar with the area operating there. And there is, in fact, a store which is directly opposite the entrance to Charing Cross Hospital. And I'm sure Dan is familiar with it, but that particular store is licensed to sell alcohol 24 hours a day. It's not got a restriction that we've got, and there are no restrictions on what they can sell. Actually, if you go into that store, you will find, as I did today, you will find strong white ciders in large bottles, and you will find single cans or super strength beers. These are the types of drinks that I'm sure Dan will confirm are generally attract the street drinking community. We don't sell any of that in our store, and we wouldn't do anyway. But there is a condition on our license to prevent that. So we're not introducing new hours to the area. There is already a 24-hour store, and that is directly opposite the hospital entrance. We're considerably further down the road. In fact, you have to go past Sainsbury's and Waitrose to get to our store. Sainsbury's and Waitrose are open probably till 11 or 12 midnight. They're not open during the night. So if anybody really wanted to get alcohol, strong alcohol during the night, then we are most unlikely to be their target for that. The data that we've produced is really to reassure you, the committee, as to the extent of this variation. And if I can just explain it, we've gone hour by hour in the 11 weeks since between 8th of May and 23rd of July. And we've looked at, well, how many alcohol products are we actually selling per hour on average during over the 24-hour periods. And really what's probably most relevant is if we had data, if there was data which showed, well, we're selling lots of alcohol between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. and 11 p.m. to midnight and midnight to 1 a.m., then there may be an argument for saying, well, we really don't want that in the area, because you're just going to be selling a lot of alcohol between 1 and 7. But you can see from the data that between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock at night, the average number of alcohol products sold is 1.47. So it's less than 2 transactions an hour between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m. Between 11 p.m. and midnight, it's 1.47 products per hour. So again, way less than 2, significantly less than 2 products per hour. And between midnight and 1 a.m., it's 1.90. So again, less than 2 products per hour. So given that we're selling less than 2 products of alcohol per hour between the hours of, say, 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. and 1 a.m., when we are allowed to sell alcohol direct to members of the public, there is no reason why that would suddenly increase between the hours of 1 a.m. and 7 a.m., which is the subject time of this application. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that the grant of the license won't substantially, the words were used by Mr. Boyes, we won't be substantially increasing the cumulative impact. It's not, we're not in a cumulative impact area, but the grant of this license is most unlikely to have any impact at all on street drinking or hospital patients being able to coming and buying alcohol. We've got the representations from the Residents Association. Seems to be a bit of confusion about whether it's a planning application or a license application, and also what policies should apply. We do always consider very carefully conditions that we need to put on. I've never seen an Ask Angela condition on an off license, so we wouldn't include that. That would be for restaurant, for bars or nightclubs. I can explain what that is if anybody wants to know. The reference was made to parking and road measures. There'll be no impact whatsoever on parking. We've got our own parking spaces here, and we're not expecting any increase in traffic as a result of the removal of this condition. There's reference to a public health document, but I'm afraid I couldn't open that, so we would need to have a full copy of that if it was to be considered by the committee. But public health is not one of the licensing objectives of the committee will be aware. Councillor Souslos has said that would have a detrimental effect on this quiet, largely residential area. I'm pleased that it is quiet, residential, and the police are saying it's a low crime area. And given the number of products that we would expect to sell during the night, there is no reason for this to be anything other than a low crime area, and it will remain a quiet, largely residential area. The terminal hour that's referenced on that was referenced by Mr. Boyes, that is not a policy hour. The policy, your policy actually states that it is the normal policy of the licensing authority to allow shops, stores and supermarkets to provide sales of alcohol for consumption off the premises at any times when the retail outlet is open for shopping, unless there are good reasons based on licensing objectives for restricting those hours. And that mirrors the government section 182 guidance, which again states that shops should generally be allowed to sell alcohol to match their trading hours unless there are good reasons. And those good reasons, for example, if the police had evidence that our shop is the focus of public disorder, and Dan is not suggesting that for a moment. In fact, he's told me that they have no issues with our store at the moment. Then there is no evidence before you today that would support anything other than us being within the policy, your policy, and also the government's guidance. In terms of other representations, well, I've dealt with the So the Residents Association have referred to an unhelpful precedent, and I think it was Dan who talked about the floodgates opening. That's not a relevant consideration in a license application, and I'm sure you'll be advised on that. Every application must be dealt with on its merits. I can assure the committee it's most unlikely that Sainsbury's and Waitrose are going to come forward with a 24-hour application simply because we remove this condition. We have, as I said, over 650 24-hour licensed petrol stations, and we've never seen one of the major supermarkets come in with a later application simply to compete with ours. Our prices tend to be higher. They're higher than the supermarket that I mentioned, that's opposite the hospital entrance, which is called Berry Food and Wine. So the precedent issue shouldn't detain us. There's other stores. This is the Residents Association, says that other stores adhere to current legislation and closing time directives. Well, so do we, and we're within policy. Refers to pubs with outside space being required to close at 10 p.m. Well, we're not a pub. We're a small store. And the additional burden to police. Well, again, we've given you the data so that you can be reassured that we're not going to be adding any burden whatsoever to the police. What I would say, however, is that if and I hope you will agree to remove this condition from the license, if Dan were to come to us and say, look, you've been operating now without that condition, we're having this X, Y, or Z problems, we want you to do something about it, then I would expect MFG, my advice to MFG would be to suspend the sales during that period. And I'm sure that being a responsible retailer and an experienced retailer, they would do so. But there's no reason for the concerns that have been raised before you today to actually materialise. And therefore we would ask you to give us the opportunity to trade 24 hours. But obviously we are aware of our responsibilities as a retailer and as a license holder. I'm sorry, I've got my cat howling outside the door, so I'm just going to have to. I think I've come to an end, but I'll just open the door if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Souslos has joined us. Councillor Souslos, is there any reason why you couldn't come into the meeting earlier?
Yes, apologies. I was following the meeting on YouTube, but I was not able to join online on Zoom. But I was following it online and happy to contribute whenever you want me to.
Yes, I would like to hear you did write in. I'm prepared to give you 5 minutes to speak. However, in fairness to the applicant, I will give them a further 5 minutes if they want to add to or to cover anything that you've said, which would ensure that we've not given anybody an advantage. Robert Botkai and the applicant, do you have an objection to that?
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Councillor Souslos, please continue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Botkai, and apologies for coming in late. I've covered the main points in my submission, and Mr. Boyce also covered in his contribution earlier a lot of the points. I will just also try and respond to what Mr. Botkai said earlier. This is, as I've already said, a residential area. It is very quiet. I must say it is, although it may not seem like it when you look at it on the map, but the presence of Berry's Food and Wine opposite the hospital, what I do understand is a 24-hour shop. It does cover a different area. You must appreciate that the shop that we are trying to talk about today covers an area that is significantly, especially to the south of it, which is not covered by Berry's Food and Wine at the moment. So it would have a significant impact on that area, essentially extending the catchment area, let's say, that alcohol could be sold. It remains an area where which is significantly residential and quiet. We are concerned, and I'm also speaking on behalf of residents of the Resident Association that Mr. Botkai mentioned earlier that they could not attend today. There is significant concern that this would lead to antisocial behavior and disorder as a result of people from outside the area in particular coming in. You will have noticed that the shop is located at a junction. Especially we've noticed cars and taxis coming into the area because also of the petrol station. They find it easier to stop there and get alcohol and perhaps get out in that area than they would with Berry's food and wine. So it has quite significant concern for my constituents. This is, as we've said, a residential area, which is not necessarily the case. Obviously, Berry's food and wine, as I said, is further up, but you will appreciate that to the east of it is the hospital. It's not exactly the same. Whereas for this particular shop, the entire area, it covers a wide radius, which is far more residential. And in response to what Mr. Bolkai said, doing business in Hammersmith and Fulham is also, it's a privilege. It's not necessarily a right. There were concerns, and I would like to communicate this to the committee that the business made no effort to communicate or to engage with the local residents. There was a condition before. People were happy with that arrangement. So there is significant, let's say, disapproval of the fact that so early on they are looking to change those conditions. And of course, there is a concern. I do appreciate that we're looking at every application. It is to be dealt with on its own merits, but there is significant concern that it could lead, of course, not from Sainsbury's and Tesco's, as the applicant said, change the licensing hours, but from other shops, future shops in the area. We have a lot of vacant properties, so there is a concern that this could lead to a domino effect. But even until that happens, what we will have, if that is approved, is a shop that can provide 24-hour alcohol. Which will not be the case for shops in the area, especially looking southwards towards Fulham. It could lead to people coming in from outside, and it could lead to people going towards the river. And it is particularly that stretch of the river that is a cause of concern, and people on the river and down Fulham Palace Road. If I may, if I can also add, the applicant also mentioned that the data on how much alcohol they're selling, and they said that there's no reason why they would be selling more at that point. Well, I appreciate that may be the case, and it's good to have the data. We also need to anticipate the potential of sales increasing, precisely because it will be a point of attraction, let's say, for people wanting to buy alcohol. Just because it's not there, it does not mean that it will not be the case afterwards. And again, while I do understand the importance of looking at every application based on its own merits, we have seen before that once there is something, once the market is there, then the demand will also appear as soon as the supply is there. I've been mainly covered under that. Mr. Boyes has covered me on his comments, and I think, having seen the comments from the police, I think it's there. For me, it's important to just stress out that it's not the same as the Berry's shop further up the road. It's a different area. It's a significantly quieter area, more residential, and the potential for antisocial behavior and disorder, both from motorists coming into the area who want to have a stop, or from people coming in a wider catchment area, is significant. Sorry, Chair.
Can I get you to conclude, Councillor Susan?
Yes, that my points have been made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the applicant and Robert Butko, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Councillor Sissos. I've been down there. The Berry food and wine is no more than a 2-minute walk, a 3-minute walk. It's on the same stretch of Fulham Palace Road as our premises. I think I simply wouldn't agree that we are in a different area. We're in the same area, but we don't trade in the same way. So we don't sell the types of products that attract the street drinking, the community, or the problem drinkers. We don't sell large bottles of white cider. We don't sell single cans of super strength beers, all of which are available 24 hours a day at Berry Food and Wine. Our experience is that the grant of a license or a 24-hour license, it doesn't mean that people will travel from far and wide. We hear this all the time. Whenever we attend a license hearing, we hear this, that we're going to become a focal point, that people are going to travel into the area from outside the area because word will get around. It doesn't happen. We don't see that elsewhere. There are plenty of 24-hour licenses in London, and we certainly don't expect that this will happen here. There seems to be a fear that we're going to change the area somehow. The data is quite conclusive, and that is evidence. So you've heard no evidence other than fears of what may happen, but our evidence is there that we're selling at less than 2 alcohol products per hour in the hours leading up to this period between 1 and 7. So there is no evidence whatsoever that we're going to be selling any more than that between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. If anything, we would expect it to be less than that. So the application does need to be considered on the evidence. I'm not quite sure why it's easier to get alcohol from us than the Berry Food and Wine. There is the assertion that we'll somehow create a market, create a demand. Well, we are already selling alcohol 24 hours a day, albeit with deliveries 1 till 7. But if there were to be that market that was going to cause the problems that the council was referring to, then the fact we're selling from up until 1 o'clock in the morning, it would have already happened. And there is no evidence before you today from the police, from the councillors, from the residents that are selling alcohol in the store up to 1 a.m. is causing any problems whatsoever. And so the fear, it's an understandable fear of what may happen. We do hear this every time we go for a 24-hour license, a fear of what may happen. We don't believe it will, and that there is no evidence before you today that it will or that it is likely to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll turn to the committee and I'll ask Councillor Stanton first. I will come back with some quick questions later.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everybody. I only have 2 or 3 questions, I think, for now, although once I've finished, I might possibly want to come back with a couple more afterwards. If I could perhaps just go to Dan Evans to start with, representing the police. Could you just expand a little on the types of problems that there are currently in the area, specifically with street drinking, if there is any, and in particular, kind of with a focus on the green areas, the parks, Lily Rec, the river. I should say, just for full disclosure, Lily Rec is actually in my ward, so I do know it quite well. But if you could just outline to us the sort of problems that you have, and perhaps the frequency.
Yeah, of course. I did have a look at the numbers, the crime numbers in the area. They are quite low, as I stated previously, but there is a lot of, should I say, a lot of street drinkers in terms of begging outside venues, causing a nuisance to the members of the public as they go past. As I said, the most recent things that we've had is mainly through the hospital, with people taking alcohol back in, patients and other people going to use the venue to for shelter. Lily Rec, I haven't really looked into as much. I haven't had, as I said, I didn't see that many people hanging around, that many crimes in that area. It's just a belief that were there to be, well, we say another 24-hour off license in the area, that could increase the crime and places that they would frequent. given that the hospital is trying to push these people out. I know they've now got the siren in the night. I don't know if you've been past the I would say siren. It's more of like an annoying tone that they play through the night to stop people from sleeping out the front. So it's whether they then move across to places like Lily Rec, where there's benches and shelter that they could go to carry on street drinking.
Thank you. And is there, I don't know whether you have this in your data, any kind of bias to the times of day where there's a bigger problem?
With the begging, it's obviously going to be hours of daytime mainly, because that's when the shops are open and things like that. And then obviously, I haven't got the numbers for more of the evening.
Okay, thank you very much. That's great. That's great. I have a question for Robert, if I may call you Robert.
Yes,
Thank you. First thing is just for clarity. You mentioned I think it was a closed door policy from 10 p.m. Can you just explain that in a bit more detail and specifically why you do it?
Yeah, it's quite normal for virtually all petrol stations. Most petrol station shops will operate through a night pay window, whether that's at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or midnight, and they do so. I mean, for the convenience and safety of the staff, and very often because we're asked to do so by the police and other officers. So it's completely normal.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, I'm a driver. I'm aware of these things, but I guess my real question is it something you do voluntarily? Is it something in this particular petrol station you've been asked to do?
No. It's done voluntarily. There's no condition on the license actually requiring us to operate through the night pay window, but we do it anyway.
So you could, in theory, change that policy.
Oh, unless you put a conditional.
Touche. Yes.
which we wouldn't object to, but I mean, strictly speaking, that condition should apply. We are only really talking about the hours of 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. I'm looking to John to nod, but if there were to be a condition, a night pay window condition between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m., that wouldn't cause us any problem at all. John, if you could just nod to confirm that I'm not. Yes, he's nodding. So that's an option to you as a committee.
Thank you very much. I was looking at the data that you provided in that the supplementary agenda, and one thing I wasn't quite sure about is what do you actually mean by a product?
It's an item of alcohol. John's the best person to answer this, but it's a product being sold. John, do you want to answer the question?
Yes, certainly. So what we did was we looked at the actual number of transactions that contained alcohol each hour over the days, and what you can see, as Robert's already alluded to, is that 1.2 or 1.9 transactions over the 77-day period contained alcohol in
Sorry to interrupt you. Could I ask those who are not speaking to mute their microphones, please?
No problem. Okay, so and in terms of that, what you'll also notice in the data is that what we've put on there as well is we've put on the number of days where a purchase hasn't actually taken place. So if you look between midnight and 1 a.m., there's 33 days where no alcohol was purchased at all out of the 77. So which is quite salient when you think of the way Robert's represented the information. It is low impact. So, almost half of the days that we've traded that store, we haven't sold a single piece of alcohol between midnight and 1 a.m. in the morning. So it's really worth looking at that and taking that into consideration. You can see from 7 till 8, 58 of those days we haven't sold a single unit of alcohol in terms of products, not in terms of ABV. And that's really what the data is there to show. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. So I mean, well, two things. One, it would be interesting to know how many of those days were raining, but but in theory, the product could be a single bottle of wine, or it could be, and I don't know if you sell it, a case of beer, or it could be 10 bottles of wine.
Yeah, essentially it's the number of transactions that contain alcohol, basically.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Robert, in your when you gave your opening earlier, and Councillor Souslos, you kind of referenced this as well. You said there's no reason why it would suddenly increase after the hours of 1 a.m. I mean, would not the reason that it would increase be that up until that point in time, you can go to Sainsbury's, which by your own statement is considerably cheaper than your own products?
I didn't say that Sainsbury's was considerably cheaper.
Sorry, no, you're right. You said you were more expensive. I inferred from that Sainsbury's was cheaper.
No, I wasn't actually referring to Sainsbury's. I was referring to Barry. I wouldn't wish to comment publicly on Sainsbury's pricing. That would get me into a lot of trouble. No, Sainsbury's, I believe, is open till midnight.
Yes.
And we are already able to sell alcohol until 1, and we're not showing a huge spike of people flooding into our store between midnight and 1 a.m. just because they can't get it at Sainsbury's. Waitrose, I think, is probably slightly earlier than Sainsbury's. Yeah, I haven't got actually the license in front of me. I'd be surprised if they were after 11 p.m. There are a number of other off licenses actually in the area which are trading to 11 p.m. And then of course you've got the 24-hour store at Berry Food and Wine selling different products in terms of the super strength and the white ciders. So no, we wouldn't expect. There's no reason to expect a large number of transactions between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. if we don't have a large number of transactions between midnight and 1 a.m. is just most unlikely.
Thank you. I mean, I guess that really begs what really I think is my final question is, if you're anticipating such a low volume of sales, why you're amending the license?
We are often asked that question as well, but we are open and trading. We have our lights on. Business is tough. The only product that we can't sell, that we're restricted on selling in terms of, we're allowed to sell petrol through the night. We can sell everything else. We have the staff there, and we have the cost of running the business. But the only restriction is selling alcohol between 1 and 7, other than by delivery to customers' homes. So there's no expectation of a huge increase in sales, but we would like to remove the restriction from that. And as I've said before, we know perfectly well that if the fears were to materialise, and we don't believe they will, then we would have to do something about it voluntarily. You can see that we are a responsible retailer already in terms of what we sell, how we sell it, and the night pay window, which is not a condition. So we would take the steps. In the time I've acted for Motor Fuel Group, which is now a number of years, I'm pleased to say, we haven't had a single license reviewed. So that's not to say that there is never a problem when you have 650 24-hour stores. It's inevitable that there will be something that will happen somewhere. There are some very different areas, but where we're contacted, where it becomes to our attention, we take voluntary steps and work with the police, and we would do that here.
Thank you very much, Chair. That's me done. You're muted, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stanton. Tony, unfortunately, I can't allow you to ask questions, but we will. I do have some questions for you, so perhaps we can discuss that. Firstly, if I can ask licensing on the application, I can't see any diagram of the premises, but there was a copy of an existing application which does have some sort of diagram to it. Could you just clarify what should or shouldn't be with the application? And
Yes, Chair. With the variation application, because they're not changing the layout of the plans, they wouldn't have needed to supply a new set of plans, which is why we put the current licence and existing plans into the committee report.
Thank you very much, Lorna. If I could come to Milan and Robert, please. Can you, looking at the application form for the original license, and at the end of it, it's got a diagram, and I'm trying to work out which way up and which way round that diagram is. Could you tell me which way is north and that, so as to just so I can get my bearings?
I don't have that plan immediately in front of me. Lorna, have you got? Do you want to share plan, and then are you able to share screen?
Sorry, are you talking about page 19? Because if so, I can probably help you with that.
Oh, I've got the plan here. Is it?
Sorry, Councillor, did you have questions?
No, I'm just saying, Chair, if you're talking about the one on page 19, I could probably help with that.
I'd like the applicant to take me through. Thanks.
Do you need north-south, or the entrance exit is marked on the bottom of that plan, and where it says forecourt, that would be leading onto Fulham Palace Road.
So on the diagram,
yeah.
Just so that I can understand, where would be the Fulham Palace Road in relation to that diagram, or could you tell me, is that diagram, I mean, Fulham Palace Road is a north-south road, so could you tell me, just really simple?
Okay, let me weigh. This is going to be a very technical exercise. So we've got the plan. Can you see the plan here? Milan, are you still with us? Yep. Is Fulham Palace Road there at the bottom of the plan?
Sure.
So you get the store entrance here. So it's really difficult, isn't it?
Okay.
So Fulham Palace Road is here.
It's here. That's the entrance, that's the exit.
But the entrance is at the side, isn't it?
On the side, yes.
Yeah. So the entrance.
Yeah, the traffic lights.
Yeah.
Sorry, could I just have one person speaking at a time? And if Robert, if you need assistance, please ask one of your.
Okay. Right. Well, I can deal with it. So,
and John, would you turn your microphone off, please?
If you see the words entrance, exit, and forecourt on that plan, so where it says forecourt, that's where the parking spaces are. And then if you go further to the left of that, so that's where Fulham Palace Road is, along the bottom. So you've got store entrance here, you've got parking here, and you've got Fulham Palace Road here.
So in its current orientation, then west is up.
Your geography is far better than mine. I'll take your word for that. Whether
no, I'm asking.
Well, I don't know which is west and which is east. Milan, do you know? If I can bring Milan in, if that's all right with you, Chair.
Okay. Are licensing able to assist with this? I know both the councillors, I'm sure, will be able to assist, as would perhaps if I go to Tony Boys as the local resident, could you please help us with the with this plan, which way up it is?
Yeah, so if you, Robert, if you show it to the screen again, so the shop is on the south side of the plot.
Now, if I can just stop there for a moment, my copy of the plan is in a different orientation to Robert's. So that's a copy with the licensing application.
Well, I've just taken it out of the bundle. The plan, I think, has been produced.
So where it says Shell Fulham Cross, if you could put that at the top of your, when you hold it up, if that could be at the top. Right, that's a different plan by the look of it.
But it's the plan in the bundle.
So within the bundle,
Sorry,
there's
Councillor, are you referring to the map of the neighbouring premises?
I'm referring to the map at the end of the. There wasn't an application there wasn't a map included on the application, but there is a map and diagram included on the original license application.
Which original application? This is an application to vary a premises license simply to remove a condition. So we wouldn't have been required to produce a plan, as Lorna said, because we're not changing anything in the layout or the position of the store. Or I'm not quite sure I follow the concern here or the relevance of the removal of the condition.
So sorry, Robert, you don't need to follow it. I just want somebody to tell me which way up the map is.
It's not my map, so Lorna, can you help?
Which page are you referring to, Councillor?
It's on the last page of the original license application, which was dated, I think was it May or? So it's application premises license 2023/00651/LAPR. And that application is it's put in as an appendix, and it's appendix 1, current license and plan, Shell Fulham Cross. Sorry, Karen, please.
Yeah, sorry. So in relation to that plan, where it does say forecourt, that faces Elaine Road. The part that's titled Shell, where the heading is, that is silver. Sorry, let me just have a look at the map.
It's Elaine Road.
Silverton Road.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Karen, that makes absolute sense to me. And now we've got our map the right way up. Where in relation to we've had quite a bit of discussion about is it Berries Wine and Waitrose and Lily Road Rec? Where in relation are those to that particular diagram?
Are you asking me or
sorry, Rob, I should be asking you, but I think I've learned from just what we've tried to do that you're not that familiar with the local area. So
well, I am, because I've walked up and down several times, so I can. The Waitrose.
Okay, oh great, sorry. So please, if you can assist.
Well, the Waitrose is diagonally opposite. So if coming from our store, and if you cross the road, you'd go to Waitrose, and if you carried on a bit further down the road, you'd come to Sainsbury's. And if you cross the road again to our side, you'd come to the food and wine store, which is directly opposite the Charing Cross Hospital entrance.
Okay, thank you very much. And if while I've got you or Milan's able to say, how does your alcohol price point compare with Waitrose, and is it Berries and other premises that you mentioned? Because there is a lot of alcohol outlets in and around the area, but for some reason, our antisocial behaviour people and problem makers, they are aware of where the cheapest place is to buy their alcohol. So I would suggest that it would make sense to me if somebody said, well, there aren't a lot of sales at the moment, but the moment they drop their price point, then the sales will increase. Okay,
well, first of all, we have national pricing, so we don't locally price. So
to talk about, it's just I'm sure you do. It's not querying that. It's just wanting to understand why the other premises are so successful at selling alcohol, as I'm led to believe, and the Shell petrol station isn't.
Well, we haven't said that we're not successful, but we tend to provide, our sales are more likely to be customers who are doing other shopping with us. Our price point tends to be, and John will confirm this, or Milan, tends to be a little bit higher than the independent retailers. I haven't done a study on Sainsbury's or Waitrose. I'd expect us to be a little bit higher than Sainsbury's. I don't know how Waitrose and Sainsbury's and Tesco compare. It depends what you're looking at, but generally the petrol station stores are not the cheapest place to buy alcohol. We're certainly not.
And you mentioned Waitrose closing at probably 11 o'clock. My understanding is that they close at 10 o'clock.
I said probably. I don't know the whether it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I suspect they're licensed till 11, but I haven't got a copy of it.
No, I don't think any of the regular stores are open past 10 o'clock.
Well, I don't know. You may have that information. I don't have the information about Waitrose.
Okay. But so if I could come to Tony Boyce, please. Tony, can you tell me how this application is going to affect local residents in fairly sort of simple, straightforward language, and put your camera on if you can, please?
Yes, I will go camera. Apologies for the look of my face. I was born that way. So there's a lot of concern about this because it does increase the envelope. I think Councillor Susler said the same. So it brings, and it is a different area. I mean, I've lived in the area for 20 years. Up by the hospital, there's quite a lot of activity, which frankly is undesirable in many ways. And although Robert said that we should consider this as an independent application and not related to the rest in any way, shape or form, and then he's referred extensively to Berry Food and Wines and Sainsbury's, so I'm not too sure which argument. Our view is that it will absolutely pull the envelope. So a lot of the casual drinkers who do, Charing Cross Hospital, very, very sadly, is one of the crime black spots in the entire area. And pulling that envelope of antisocial behaviour further south into that, it's called the Crabtree Estate for reasons we don't need to go into here, but that residential area there, they are very, very concerned that this will bring down the late night casual drinkers, and they'll saunter off towards the riverside and create a lot of problem. And my final point, if I may, is that I think I was present at the original licensing when the grant of all night alcohol from 1 to 7 in the morning was given on this condition, that it was not going to be ever made available for off license. I'm actually very disappointed that we're now seeing this application to have that condition removed.
I just gently object to that statement, Chair, please. Thank you. Perhaps legal would assist on that.
You're muted.
Sure, which part you were objecting to?
Sorry, it's not a cross discussion. I didn't let Tony ask questions of other people, so Robert, I'd ask you not to ask questions of Tony. If I can ask, just come to Dan and to police officers, Officer Evans and Officers Cardwell. Can you please help us on the picture of the crime and disorder element? And just, I know your brief doesn't normally cover accidents and what goes on the roads. But from memory, the Fulham Palace Road is the A319, and the and Lily Road is the A3218. So these are both A roads, and this is it's a very busy junction, and the I'm concerned because I'm aware of a hell of a lot of accidents in that area, and I don't know if the police can expand on any incidents that have been on the petrol station or in the forecourt, or problems with street drinkers in this area, or numerous traffic violations from delivery cyclists and delivery mopeds. I appreciate that's not within the police's normal brief for licensing, but any light you can shed on this would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, I can go back to my time. I used to work as a response officer in Hammersmith and Fulham, so I've worked the area in that respect for 7 years. That area is quite a busy junction, as you said. You do get a few road traffic collisions. I remember one where someone's actually overturned and gone into one of the bus stops quite close to that junction, and that was only last year. As I said, I looked at some of the crime reports from the last 6 months, which for the Shell garage, that was a lot of kind of theft of petrol, so making off without payment. There was one for I think there was an abusive customer, but generally around that area you get a lot of kind of shoplifting and that sort of behaviour. If that answers your question.
Yes, that's very helpful indeed. Thank you very much. Councillor Souslos, you speak to local residents in the area. Can you just give us some more, just a simple sort of layman's understanding of the area and the types of undesirables that are hanging around, and the potential concerns of residents, and residents are entitled to express their concerns without necessarily having a police standard evidence behind their concerns.
Absolutely, Chair, you're right. And I would like to say, well, I may not have the evidence, and I do appreciate that evidence would be beneficial for everyone. I hope you can trust me in what I'm saying to be true. And I have had a lot of residents, not even necessarily related to this application, but in the past expressing concerns. For example, Silverton Road, which is just behind the shop, is a sort of a blind spot. And I have had to deal with many residents complaining about fly tipping and rubbish left over there, especially from takeaways, especially cans of beer and alcohol that had been left there overnight. And we had to flag this with our law enforcement teams and ask them to patrol the area a lot more to make sure that this is not happening. And that was a significant cause of concern. We also had, line bikes and e-bikes dumped at the back. That was a few months ago. And action has been taken. I do admit that, I haven't heard from the same residents who were complaining about fly tipping. This may not necessarily mean that this has been resolved, but that was definitely the case a few months back. There have been other residents who have raised, for example, the fact that in the early hours of the night, with Fulham Palace Road being relatively empty, they hear a lot of speeding from cars, which of course raises an important safety factor. I know that, for example, if there was a pub that you were dealing with, you would have to look at, customers drinking alcohol, going out of the premises, and the potential of traffic accidents. I would have to raise, I imagine there is a level to this application, that there is a lot of speeding along Fulham Palace Road in the early hours, which does impact our residents. And I would imagine that even if it's, residents noisily drinking or going about the business, that would also have a significant impact on a large residential street. There are no businesses around. It is very quiet, so every little noise will be picked up, and you will appreciate that, especially the side streets, not Fulham Palace Road itself, but the side streets, Ella Line, Silverton, Rannoch, and all those going around immediately front the street. So any little noise, even chatter, will have an impact on residents. And I would just like to pick up on the points. I do believe that it's a significant factor compared to Berry's Food and Wine, which, let's say, has an orientation of northwards, that as we said, this particular shop can cover a much wider area, especially going southwards, which does not have any shops at the moment, and previous off licenses that were there have now closed. So it will be the only shop for a large amount of people that will be able to shop there. And with the weather perhaps being much better over the summer months and in the autumn, it raises the potential and the danger of people just using that to go in the river. That's what most concerns us here.
Thank you, Councillor. If we go back to the applicant and the diagram of the premises, on the diagram I can see it is a bit blurry, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there 3 separate toilets in the store and some urinals, and are they for the use of customers or are they staff?
Okay. As I've indicated, well, there are toilets in the store, but the customers don't have access. This application relates to the period of time between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. when the customers.
Sorry, I just wanted to exercise my right to ask a question. Which the toilets on the diagram, are they for use of customers, patrons, or is it exclusively for staff?
Not between the hours of 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. Because the customers are not, well, in fact, we close the doors at 10 p.m. And reopen it at 6. So the customers would not be given access to the toilets. We don't admit the customers into the premises between the hours that are relevant to this application.
So right. But normally they would customers would be able to go in. They are customer toilets, even if they're not open at those times.
I can vouch for those customer toilets that were fully operational today. There are men's and ladies' toilets, and they were clean and accessible to customers. Yes.
Yeah. So and any time during the day outside of what the application is, they could normally use them, but for the purpose of the variation in the license that you want to make, the toilets are not usable by anybody other than staff.
But that's right, because yes, the doors to the shop are closed. Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions for now. Councillor Stanton?
No, nothing from me, Chair.
Okay. Well, in that case, if there's no further questions from councillors, then I'm not going to ask any more questions. So I will, at this point, I will ask. We'll go to the summing up phase, and I'll firstly ask the licensing officer, Lorna McKenna, to please sum up and to keep it within about 3 minutes, please.
Nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you, Lorna. The responsible authority, Dan Evans from the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, just to say, obviously, Berry Food and Wine, that's an old license. And nowadays, if anyone put in for that, we would object to it. We don't want any more 24-hour off licenses on the borough. Allowing one would then open up the floodgates for others to go for the same. I know he's put in to say that they're only selling small numbers at the moment, but I believe that number will rise as and when, or if it got the license permitted. So yeah, that's why we are objecting to it.
Thank you. And I'll now come to Tony Boys. Tony, I appreciate there's a lot you want to say, and I would just bear in mind that what you say is going to be is what the committee are going to have in their mind. So if I could ask you to be as concise as possible, and I'll give you approximately 3 minutes as I have done with the others, but please be concise.
Even more concise, I just want to thank you for a very well-run and rigorous session. I agree with everything that Dan has said. We are very concerned about any increase in alcohol, and I thank you all for your time and attention. As I say, I think very, very impressive, very well-run session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Souslos.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. I would also like to echo the comments made by Mr. Evans and by the residents, both in the written submissions and Mr. Boyce being the meeting. I would just like to say, as the applicant said, they do not expect to make many sales during the hours after 1 a.m. I would like to raise the alarm, though, that those few sales would disproportionately impact our residents. So if we're dealing here with something that would not have a negative impact on the business, but would have a negative impact on the residents, I would like to take the committee to take that into account. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. And Robert Botkai, I've got 9 minutes here approximately, and I'll leave it to you if you need more, because I have allowed some other speakers to speak a little bit longer.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, can I just jump in? The reason it says 9 minutes is because that was like the added up 3 minutes for each of the other speakers, but they haven't really taken that time. So I would suggest maybe less time that's equal to the others.
Thank you, David.
I don't expect to take that long, and thank you. And it's always good to be questioned on our applications, and you've certainly done that this evening. I hope that it's reassuring that you've heard from the police that there is low crime at our premises. They've mentioned the what we call drive-offs, which has got really nothing to do with these premises. So there's no evidence from the police that we are any sort of focus of crime and disorder, and you've heard from others that the area immediately around us is very quiet. The potential for road traffic accidents is a new point which wasn't raised in representations, and I don't see any evidence. I've never seen any evidence in any case where a petrol station is selling alcohol that could have any impact whatsoever on road traffic accidents. I'd be extremely surprised if that were any part of the police case before you today, because I've certainly not seen any evidence, and I've presented hundreds of these applications and dealt with the police all over the country. There was a concern, I think, about shoplifting. I've got to note, well, there won't be any shoplifting in the relevant hours between 1 a.m. and 7 a.m. where I think, sorry, Dan mentioned the occasional shoplifting at these at the premises. All shops suffer from the shoplifting, but obviously there won't be any shoplifting at all because customers don't have access to the premises during the relevant times. There's a concern that if this condition is removed, that late night drinkers will migrate to our premises, and Goethe will advise you on this. There is case law that's not necessary. You need to exercise caution in assuming that a problem that doesn't exist will all of a sudden migrate down to our premises. But I'll leave that to Goethe to advise you on the case law on that. This about begging was also raised. I think, Chair, you asked about begging, and Dan was good enough to acknowledge that if there is begging in the area, then that tends to be outside supermarkets and other premises, but during the daytime. And again, there's no suggestion and we certainly don't experience begging at our store, and certainly not during these hours. We wouldn't expect that to be a factor at all. The fly tipping, I'm not quite sure why that's relevant to this application, so I won't dwell on that. And likewise, the toilets, I'm not sure if the suggestion is that because we're selling alcohol, we should be providing toilets. I don't know whether that's where these questions were coming from. It's not something I've ever been asked before, but we don't sell alcohol for consumption on the premises, and we certainly don't encourage people to drink in the vicinity. So it would be extremely odd for us to be, for an off license, to be providing toilets for customers as a condition of us selling alcohol. So I'm not quite sure I follow that, but there are toilets there for customers, but obviously only when the shop doors are open. So to conclude, the crime numbers are low. This application, you may not be comfortable with the application, and that's often the case with the 24-hour license application. And it does seem, I didn't deal with the previous application here, but it seems that this license has been granted in stages. Certainly when in 1994, I don't believe it had a 24-hour license. Then I don't have it in front of me, but that's not unusual. So there will have been discomfort then about 24 hours. So the then applicant will have agreed the 1 to 7 condition, and there's discomfort now about 24-hour sales. We deal with these applications and these hearings where we hear the same arguments about what residents believe will happen if we secure a 24-hour license. And our experience is very much that these fears do not materialize. And at every one of those hearings, and they are sadly probably about hundreds of these hearings now, because they tend to be where residents object. At every one of those hearings, I make the point of saying, as I have done today, please, if these problems do materialize, come and talk to us. You can have our contact details, you can have my contact details, you can have Milan's contact details. And if we don't do something about it, then we know perfectly well that it's obvious where the problem is coming from, because we weren't selling before, we are now. All of a sudden we've got the problems, whether it's from the hospital or from begging or from street drinking. And if we don't deal with that, then we would be back before you for a license review, at which point you would have actual evidence. Well, this has happened on this day, this has happened on this day at this time. We want you to review the license, and at that point you can revoke the license, you can introduce new steps, you could remove the DPS. So that it's quite draconian. And I hope that you take some comfort that we have some 650 plus 24-hour licenses around the country, including in London, and none of those licenses have been brought before a licensing committee for a review, not one. And we don't expect this one to be pulled back to you either. So
Robert, having been advised about the 9 minutes, could I get you to start to come to a conclusion, please?
Okay, I wasn't timing myself, but I don't know whether I'm close to that 9 minutes. So I've lost my thread now. I would ask you to deal with the application based on the evidence that you've heard today, and that's got to be real evidence. And again, Goethe will advise you on the case law on this. There does need to be evidence to support a refusal. We are within your own policy, which allows shops to match their trading hours. We are within the government's Section 182 guidance, which allows shops to match their hours unless there are good reasons to reject those hours. I don't accept, I'm a little bit surprised that the police would say in a hearing that they don't want any 24-hour licenses in the borough. I don't think that's police policy. And it certainly isn't your policy at all. Every application must be dealt with on its merits. We've demonstrated that this removal of this condition is most unlikely to have any impact whatsoever on the licensing objectives. But we also recognise that a license is a privilege, and we will continue to be responsible retailers so that we don't appear on Dan's crime figures in the future. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. And having reached the end of the summing up, committee will now retire to take this decision in a separate meeting room. You're welcome to remain in the meeting to hear the committee's decision. However, this may take some time. If you don't want to wait, a summary decision will be published on the council's website tomorrow morning. Can I ask members to turn off their videos, mute their microphones and join the private Teams meeting for deliberations. David, could you confirm when we're ready to resume?
Yeah, ready now, Chair.
Thank you. The London Borough will resume. The London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham summary decision of the licensing committee, 31st of July 2023. Premises located at Shell Fulham Cross 222 to 224 Fulham Palace Road, London, W6 9NT. The premises. The committee has considered an application for the variation of the premises licence to remove condition 19 attached to Annex 2 of the existing licence under the Licensing Act 2003, the application. In summary, the committee has decided, after taking into account all of the individual circumstances of this case and the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, to reject the application. A copy of this committee's full decision, including its reasons, will be sent to the parties forthwith. If the applicant is unhappy with the decision, they are entitled to appeal to the Magistrates' Court within 21 days from the date of notification of the full decision. Licensing Committee dated 31st of July.